I'm Nigel S.
Steve, special. Yeah.
So, Mr. Beshel, today what I want to talk about, let me just do this. So, one of my favorite filmmakers is Christopher Nolan. One of my favorite professors, a professor that you know because we went to the same school and had the same classes, Professor Calvin. Christopher Nolan and Professor Calvin have a similarity in that they believe people should still be filming on film.
Yeah, they're diehards.
During this digital age, they still believe that.
Still the best way to go in their mind.
I want to know what Beshel feels about this.
I think shooting on digital is much faster, much more convenient, much less mistake prone. You don't have to worry about, getting the footage a few months later and saying, oh, yeah, that punch totally missed that guy's face. We're going to have to get everyone back together to redo that. Digital, you just see that the very next day, and then you fix it. Simple as that. But they don't think so. I just don't know.
See, and people like that, it goes with music too, like Christopher Nolan and Professor Cal. They're kind of like the people when it comes to vinyl and music. They're like, it's purist. But I'm like, not really, because over time, the vinyl degrades and the sound changes. Yeah. Same thing with film. The film actually degrades over time. The picture changes. Whereas just digital, you can get it clear, and it's purely that sound or purely that visuals.
Well, especially considering after they shoot it on film, they have to convert it to digital anyway for that reason. So Why not just do it from the start?
Exactly.
I mean, I admire their commitment to it. Obviously, they're trying to keep something they think is significant to the history of film alive. But at some point, you do have to adapt. You have to realize that this is easier. Like, you look at some of Christopher Nolan's movies, and technically, he's a very, very talented director. Like no one could ever say otherwise.
Oh, no question.
But there are mistakes I've seen that could have been avoided had he shot digital. Like, if you ever look...
His fight scenes.
I was just about to say that. You look at the fight choreography for any of his Batman movies, they're wild. People just throwing punches wildly, going over the other dude's head. It's obvious, like, when there's, like, a person who's taking the hit when you didn't see anyone actually make contact with them.
Right.
Also, one of his earlier films, Insomnia, with Al Pacino and Robin Williams, there's a chase scene in there that's horribly edited. And I know that it's not because the editor was bad. I know it's because the footage was just not that good, and they just had to work with what they had. So if they had shot that digitally, that wouldn't have been a problem.
Yeah, like I was watching, because I love watching behind the scenes of stuff. Mm-hmm. And I was watching about the Dark Knight series, the trilogy, and they were talking about how they took, I think it's called KP or KT, the new fight, it's fairly new fighting style. And Christopher Nolan was talking about how he took that for the Batman trilogy and he made it more cinematic.
I believe it was Krav Maga, right?
No.
No,
that would
have been Batman Begins then.
It was developed by these two guys that are like English or Australian, and it's all about fighting in a bar.
Mm-hmm.
They fight. The fighting stance is like this.
Yeah.
And he said he made it more cinematic for the camera, but I was like, how? Now, don't get me wrong. I'm a big fan of Christopher Nolan. But those fight scenes were underwhelming.
Yeah.
And it goes back to the fact that with digital, you can do playback.
Mm-hmm.
Now, let me say this. I do believe the practices of film should still be applied. The idea of let's not just rely on post. Let's make sure we get it in camera the right way.
Yeah,
I do believe we should do
lots
those
of coverage.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, like, his commitment to practical effects, I think that's wonderful. Like, that's something that should never die out. Like, there's just something, it's just different. Like, you look at, like, the car chase in that, when you're seeing this truck actually get flipped over, you just can't, knock on wood, you can't copy that with CGI. 5 years later, they'll have it perfect,
Yeah.
But, yeah, I mean, so I do think there's a little bit of stubbornness in that. I feel like you kind of saw that when he was releasing Tenet. It's like it had to be in the theater. And I'm like, I understand that this is important, but during all this is not the right time. You have to prioritize certain things. So I think he's just like a purist to a fault sometimes. Like, and in other ways, that's a really great thing. But I think sometimes he can't reconcile like the old-fashioned aspects with the stuff that I do think should stay in the present time.
Exactly, and not to keep bashing Christopher Nolan because I love Christopher Nolan.
He's a genius.
I
He's a
didn't
brilliant guy.
Yeah, and I didn't expect to keep talking about Christopher Nolan, but I want to bring up a point because you brought up Tenet. I do like the movie. It was great. There's some sequences in there because I watched it behind the scenes.
Mm-hmm.
There's some sequences in there. I'm like, you didn't have to train your stunt guys to do it in reverse. You could have just shot in reverse.
Yeah. Well, they did that with the old Star Wars movies when in the scene in The Empire Strikes Back where he pulls the lightsaber into his hand, they had just shot the scene and then played it back in reverse. Like it was like a simple trick like that. So I feel like you're making more work for yourself. It's when Robert Rodriguez spends all this money to make his movies look like they were made with no money. Like just make them with no money, that's easier.
Yeah, and I'm just like some of those sequences. He was like, we rehearsed this sequence to be in reverse and da da da, and I'm like, you didn't have to do it. Like you could have just shot it and put it in reverse for some of those sequences, but they trained and they rehearsed, and I'm like, sometimes I'm like, it goes too far.
Yeah,
you know,
you can go too far. You're a little too committed to a fault.
Yeah, I'm like, you really didn't have to, especially for us, being in the film school that we came from and being taught what we taught, make the most out of the little that you have. It's like we can do little tricks with us. Like we can do some sequences, and I was looking at some of the sequences, and I'm like, we could do that if we just reversed it, like I've done some reverse tricks to make it look like, like telekinetic powers or something. Like you can do stuff like that.
Yeah.
But that being said, I love Christopher Nolan. I love his work.
Can't wait for his next movie, whatever it may be.
Yeah, exactly. But it's just some of these, that talk of, film is the best way to go. And I'm just like,
You really can't say that anymore,
And I don't want to say the wrong name, but I was reading something about, I think it was Steven Spielberg, and he talked about how he transitioned from film to digital specifically for what was that movie, Ready Player One?
Yeah, Ready Player One.
And he was just amazed with the color palette. I'm probably wrong. Somebody's probably going to correct me in the comments or just curse at me from the screen at home. But like, they were just amazed by how you can manipulate color and make it come out, and I like that about digital.
Well, you're seeing a lot of innovativeness with that. You're seeing, like, the film industry is evolving. Like we're seeing right now a giant leap forward in how you make movies. Like from Jon Favreau with his use of virtual cameras and LED screens. Recently Disney did a movie where everything was done with a certain setup, and it just made shooting the movie and then getting it out so much faster and so much cheaper.
Safety.
Yeah. So we're seeing a lot of impressive stuff going on. You're making movies for less money now, but they look more expensive than ever. So
yes.
I feel like when you're seeing all this innovativeness, it doesn't help anyone to stick in the past.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, like, let's be honest. Let's be real. I'm going to say something that's going to be very controversial.
Hot take incoming.
If you're a purist, you're a digital guy. Pure is digital. If you want to get the purest sound of that sound, if you want to get the purest quality of that video, it's going to be digital, not film or vinyl. It's going to be digital.
Yeah, you have to do what's best for the product, and digital's the best.
Digital's the best. It's so much easier, and like I feel like what a time to be a filmmaker because we have so many tools to our disposal. Look at what people are creating in their backyards, and what people are creating on like a couple thousand on a budget or no budget. Like it's amazing what you can do with sound and visual effects and video. It's amazing.
Wonderful creativity. I think we're going to see so much more of that in the next decade. I mean, you're going to see people just embrace their artistic side, and we're going to see some really amazing stuff. And, we'll see the rise of the next generation of filmmakers. I'm very excited for it.
Exactly, because with the technology that's happening now,
give a voice to people who didn't have a voice before.
Exactly. You would have never thought Joe Schmo across the street had a story to tell.
Yeah.
Because he didn't have money for film. He didn't have money for the person to develop the film, the person to take that film, put it in a big machine to develop it. It's like now Joe Schmo can take, we all have 4K cameras in our pockets. Yeah. He could take his 4K camera in his pocket. He can go in his little consumer laptop, download a nice consumer editing software, and put something together, and they got something to say.
Joe Schmo is gonna make the next blockbuster.
Word, Joe Schmo, holla at us, man. We making content out here. What's up?
Marvel's calling him up right now.
Yeah, man. Like, we can do what we want to do, man. Even if you're not good, say, like, you're not the best at visual effects, buy a visual effects pack.
Yeah.
Get it for like maybe $100 offline.
Well, and there's another thing. You see the democratization of the filmmaking industry on YouTube. So many people willing to reach out and help their fellow filmmakers on how they can be better.
Yes.
Back in the day, you'd see people that would kind of hold that close to the vest, because they wanted their own films to be, what everyone was talking about. Now it's like you just want everyone around you to succeed. I think that's great.
Yes, there's enough for everybody, man. There's like billions of people in the world.
Yeah.
So we shouldn't just be relying on like 50 people to give us all our content. I know that ratio is horrible. I know that number is horrible, but
there's an audience for everything.
Exactly. There's always an audience for everything. As long as you're putting out positivity, I'm with you, man. Just don't be putting out some other stuff, man. But yeah, like when it comes down to it, I love what's going on with digital filmmaking. I know for me, one thing that I always take is what Professor Cal, shout out to Professor Calvin, what he taught us. He taught us how to take the principles of using film and apply it to digital. So like we talk about it even now when we film stuff. Like we're not going to rely on it in post. Yeah. We're gonna make sure the film looks how it should look, and then we'll go to the editing room.
Absolutely.
And do what we do. Like we know how to get the lighting right. We know, and that's all from a professor who grew up in that film era, who passed it on to us. Yeah, old school.
He's one of the originals, but what he really drives home is don't use it as a crutch. Like all these tools, don't become over dependent on them. They're there for you if you need them, but do the most you can on your own, and then just use that to make it that much better.
Right. The last thing you want to do is use it as a crutch. I tried that and learned the hard way that it doesn't work.
I'm still learning. So,
yeah. We're all still learning. It's like you gotta take that knowledge of that film aspect and apply it to the digital age. I think that's what they should keep doing, even though we have all these tools, is to take that film mindset. Like, yo, you got to get it on this time. You can't rely on it in post. Just because you have a bunch of SD cards doesn't mean you should just keep doing takes.
Just use your resources well. You use little resources well, you'll make a better movie than people who have a lot of resources and use them badly.
Exactly. Take the resources that you have and learn to hone your skills with those resources. Because have you ever seen film from a beginner who had like $1,000 camera versus somebody who's a veteran and they have like maybe like a couple $100 camera, and you see the difference?
Yeah.
It's like, it's not really about the equipment. It's what you do with it. It's how you use it. Like, know the limitations of your equipment and try to take yourself to the next level. And people will notice that, and just take that mindset and keep running with it. That being said, digital for life, baby.
Digital for life.
But we appreciate the filmmakers that came before us, who used film and taught it to us.
They earned their right to complain.
Exactly. True. Yeah. True. Because Lord knows I have an old soul, and I'm still learning the social media stuff. I grew up when there was dial-up. So I'm still that guy like, oh, they got a new app with TikTok. What was that?
Well, just wait. 20, 30 years from now, we'll be complaining about all the kids just relying on AI to write the movies for them instead of making it themselves.
Back in my day, you wrote the script yourself.
Yeah.
Now they got all this AI stuff. Like, oh, they'll just have like a LUT.
Yeah.
And the AI will just apply the LUT and white balance everything automatically. Yeah. It'll take like a few seconds.
It's like, you don't know how good you had it.
Back in my day, I had to toggle the wheels. Yeah. So the color, I had to get a 4K monitor to make sure the color was just the way it should be.
Do you know how difficult it was to set up the equipment for a podcast? It took forever.
Now they got a podcast in a pocket. Ain't that what? Podcast in a pocket? Come on, man. But yeah, that was the Nomad BitCast. I'm Nigel S.
Steve Beschel.
Be creative, my friends.